Okay, I guess it's time for another book discussion. Again, stuff that I picked up from the little free libraries. And in this case, it's the second and third book of the Soldier's Son trilogy. I did not get to, I didn't find the first book of them, but, this is kind of how these things work. I found this particularly interesting series. It's fantasy, fantasy in the sense not the high fantasy wizards throwing magic around and whatnot, but a world in which there is magic, and the main storyline is about a character who's essentially afflicted with magic. He has a life in front of him to serve, within the military, and that's the plan of everything that his father has for him, and that he sort of embraces himself. Yet, back in the first book, which I didn't get to read, but some of the storyline is from, is repeated and explained, just in case, you forget things. Trilogies tend to do this kind of thing where they flash back to what's happened and whatnot, and talk a lot about it. It's kind of funny because this is not what Lord of the Rings does, right? Lord of the Rings just doesn't try to give you a lot of this exposition from prior books and whatnot. But as trilogies have become more and more, and multi-series books have become, or multi-book series have become more and more common, they tend to give you a lot of the story so far again and again and again. Either with sort of like hey, here's what happened so far, just right out front, but in this case, it just sort of flowed in, and it was fine to pick up, from the second book. I don't know if I would have felt as comfortable picking up from the third book. While the story is kind of that, a young man growing up and discovering magic, as it were, and a number of similar type of pretty standard fantasy tropes, it doesn't feel at all like, your normal book of this sort. For one thing, he's constantly in conflict with himself, unwilling to accept the magic, unable to even see it or understand it. It's just sort of something that he gets glimpses of. It also wreaks massive changes on him that are debilitating, essentially, where by the time that the second book, starts flowing at all, the plague which has given him this magic, it's not that simple, but it actually came from somewhere else and was there, and the plague awakened it or whatever. But it has also, had him putting on weight in tremendous quantities. And that's actually the magic stirring up in him. And he goes and eventually, it wrecks his entire life, and it, along with things that the magic does to him, are just a series of worse and worse situations that it's putting him in, further and further destroying his life. Now, what's interesting is usually these kind of stories, the main character, the protagonist, has this driving goal maybe it's not all available initially, but they've got sort of this desire to work towards and whatever. And here, the main character's driving goal is to kind of avoid all of this shit. It kind of reminds me of another book that influenced me very, very heavily, or another trilogy, which was the Thomas Covenant series. The later ones didn't as much, but again, this in the case of the Covenant series, his cursing his fortune and hating everything and despising the magic because he can't trust it, was just so compelling and such a rich character trait that I actually took on, various aspects of that character. While this one, in some ways, is, I actually find the dual nature, his sort of straddling worlds and whatnot, very persuasive as a template for things that I feel like I live. I didn't feel the same kind of powerful character, the same kind of. In fact, the character himself is very weak throughout. He feels more battered back and forth, by the events of the magic, etc. Which I don't know if that's good or bad. I wouldn't want to take on this character in any sense. So, I mean, if he could have been strengthened in some way that, made it more, I don't know, available to me to hook into and to take on, that would be a very bad thing. So, I'm kind of glad that the character was not powerful enough to start affecting me heavily, although I do see these interesting parallels within the story. And like I said, he's sort of just battered back and forth by events in the story. His own agency is almost continuously a failure. And it's the hand of the magic itself which drives everything. And although he resists it, without even really knowing what he's doing, it's almost as though he must resist. Like, that's also kind of baked into this. And what you end up with is this very, very depressing tale, which, again, I find appealing in its own way. In the end, it comes to a positive outcome. I mean, it's not like an Orwellian novel. And, you think 1984, the way, everything just goes wrong, and it's just clear that it's going to go badly. But it's not just that. I mean, Animal Farm, obviously, but I was actually thinking Burmese Nights, where you're just seeing this slow decline across. That's how this feels like it's going, but it doesn't end up that way. However, the path of destruction throughout his life and throughout those who touch his life is so high that you can't come out of it and say, yay, he won. And it's not like he's trying to get a goal particularly, although he supports the goal that the magic's trying to pursue. And he's also split. This becomes clear in the third volume, where there is a part of him which is aligned with the magic and with the people of the magic, who are, these humans, but they're forest humans, and they have a very different culture, and they, serve the magic, basically. As opposed to a more, I don't want to say, a more European view of society, etc., where there are lords and there's iron working and guns and whatnot, that follows a more civilized or type of, and I mean that in the sense of civil, based on civic, based on cities, sort of society, as opposed to this magical, shamanistic forest society that's actually nomadic. And in fact, I believe, the territory that this kingdom is expanding into is over the bones of an earlier shamanistic, nomadic society that used magic, that was an enemy of these forest people. And it's kind of funny because then in the end, through nothing that the character has really strove for, the magic just steps in and does what it did and ties everything together. Yes, the character surrenders to it. In fact, it's the more magical side of the character that surrenders to it, to linking the two parts together so that this can all happen. And then they're torn asunder again, which kind of feels funny, but so that they can each have their own reward for what it's worth. And in one, in the magical character side of it, it's death, but everlasting life, within the magic essentially. And within the other character, it's to find something that's somewhat like the life that, he was aspiring to before the whole series started. I find that very, very appealing in a way, because so many books you just look at it and you're like, well, they go, you can see where they're going to go. Here, I could not tell where this story was heading. I couldn't tell what the end point would be. I suspected it would be good from something's point of view, but I didn't know what. However, on the other hand, the idea that life is just sort of a series of events battering you back and forth, and that you're just, really a shuttlecock that's being used, or just this leaf on a river or whatever, essentially, and you have no real control over existence. That is discouraging, but more real than being able to accurately control your existence. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. I will keep these, and perhaps if I live long enough, read them again someday. Cheers.